Episode 23 this week, This Side of Paradise. This episode, almost an exact duplicate of The Return of the Archons. Almost the exact same plot, down to the plot holes. It's like they'd ran out of ideas. They said, hey, that was a good episode, let's remake it slightly. They said, okay, sure. This time they went to a planet that there is veritable radiation hitting. A ship had gone there years earlier to start up an agriculture colony. They said, well, those people are dead. No way could they survive that. They're clearly lost. And when they beamed down, there they were. They said, well, that's weird. That's really weird. Turns out these plants would shoot spores at them, and then for reasons never once explained, it protected them from the veritable radiation. Captain Kirk couldn't stand that. He's like, how dare they survive on this planet and not die from radiation poisoning? Something's got to be done about this. Not study the plants, apparently, because he never did that. Mr. Spock, the first to get affected, he was just like Mr. Sulu in Return of the Archons, where he was just drugged out of his mind, didn't listen to the captain, and they didn't know what was wrong. Then slowly the rest of the crew got affected. In Return of the Archons saw only a handful of people. This time it was the entire ship, including, briefly, Captain Kirk that was affected. But then Captain Kirk realized adrenaline reversed the effects of the spores for reasons never explained. Nor was it explained why none of the people from the colony ever lost the spores from adrenaline. Never once they explained that. Captain Kirk figured Mr. Spock was close to a computer, so he had Mr. Spock beam up under false pretenses, and then he did his old computer thing where he tricks and confuses the computer into blowing up. So he tricked and confused Mr. Spock into fighting with him, and then right before Spock killed Captain Kirk, he was fine. Perfectly fine. They beam up Spock's girlfriend, who apparently he had a relationship with years earlier, that was never explained either. Never explained before, never explained since. They just briefly gloss over it. It would have been a more interesting episode had they delved into that, possibly, but they did not. And she's like, oh, well, you're not in control with the spores anymore, so I guess that's over. And Spock was like, yeah, it is. And that was pretty much it. That's pretty much the episode. Mr. Sulu affected by the spores, just like in Return of the Archons. It was a very similar episode. Very similar. Except Spock had a girlfriend in this one that apparently he had before, but no one had ever heard of her before or since. Never. Would have been really interesting to get into that, but they did not. Ever. Some interesting notes in this one. It's just like Return of the Archons. And also, it is possibly the worst papier-mâché mishap they ever had in an episode of Star Trek. When Mr. Spock punched a monitor in the engineering, actually the transporter room, after he missed Captain Kirk, his hand went right through the papier-mâché. Very clearly papier-mâché. Why they would have a papier-mâché monitor, never explained. But it was the most third grade level play looking papier-mâché you'll ever see, and they put it on a primetime network TV show. Not the best decision they ever made. It was not. Also, Lieutenant Uhura short-circuited the entire communication systems except ship to surface. No charges of mutiny. She was under the spores, so I guess they forewent the mutiny charges. Captain Kirk never once charged anyone with mutiny, even though they all mutinied and they beamed down to the planet. He was seconds away from beaming down, which would have caused the ship to be abandoned and eventually lose orbit and crash into the planet. They dodged a bullet there. That's pretty much episode 23.